is the slide presentation ready when we're getting ready for that section of the agenda? Just want to make sure that's set up also. So this is Commissioner Bailey, and I'm calling this meeting to order. The first matter of business is the General Statute 130A-15 mandates that the chair inquire as to whether any member knows of any known conflict of interest or appearance of conflict with respect to matters before the Management, Groundwater, and Waste Management Committee. If any member knows of a conflict of interest or appearance of conflict, please so state at this time. Hearing none, and I also noted that Commissioner Lyerly texted that he does not have a conflict. We'll move on to the next matter of business, which is approval of the meeting summary from March 8, 2023. I had an opportunity to review it and I had no changes. I also noted that in the minutes, they put in some links to topics that we discussed, which I thought was a great idea. So do I have any questions or comments or a motion to approve the minutes?
Yes, Commissioner Bailey, this is David Anderson, and I vote to approve this minutes.
Thank you, Commissioner Anderson. Do I have a second?
Commissioner Carter, I'll second.
Thank you, Commissioner Carter. And it's my understanding we have to go through the roll call to get the minutes approved.
That's
So,
correct, Madam Chair.
yes?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so Commissioner Carter,
Aye.
Commissioner Anderson, Commissioner Lyerly,
I believe he just submitted a note saying that he approves the minutes, votes to approve the minutes, Madam Chair.
and thank you. Commissioner Weiss? She's on mute.
Aye.
Thank you. The minutes have been approved. Next item on the agenda is the items today. This is another informational item, which we've been putting together since we've had haven't had too many action items lately, thankfully. So we're going to have an overview of the recycling and materials management section of the Division of Environmental Assistance and Customer Service. So we have Wendy Worley and Cindy Skolachenko to do the presentation.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I want to thank the Commission for inviting us to speak today. For those of you who don't know, I am Wendy Worley. I am the Section Chief for Recycling Materials Management. So I'm going to try to share my screen, so if you bear with me a moment.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your presentation today.
Mm-hmm. Can everyone see that?
Yes, I can see it fine.
Wonderful. So thank you again for inviting us to come and speak with you all today. Again, my name is Wendy Worley, and I am the Section Chief for Recycling and Materials Management. We are a non-regulatory section, also in the non-regulatory division of Environmental Assistance and Customer Service. And as you introduced, I also have with me Sandy Skolachenko on my staff, who is going to also share with you some of the information. I'm going to provide just a brief overview of what we do in our section, and then Sandy's going to take over and share with you some of the details of the work that we do. The Recycling and Materials Management section is a non-regulatory group within DEQ, and we provide local government and recycling business technical assistance all throughout the state of North Carolina, with our goal to provide technical assistance, grants, data, and studies that help facilitate the diversion of solid waste materials back into the recycling economy. Again, we do this from a variety of mechanisms that Sandy's going to go into in a little bit more detail, and I'd like to hand it over to Sandy.
Thanks, Wendy. I'm still seeing the title slide. Is that what everyone else sees?
That's what I see.
How is that forwarding now?
It stopped your screen share.
Can you see this data, the slide now?
Nope, I don't see anything shared.
Okay, hang on.
Okay,
There
I
we
see
go.
it now. Okay, thanks, Wendy. So as Wendy mentioned, one of the responsibilities of our division and section is statewide data collection and report writing. And somewhat, one of the biggest, probably the biggest reporting endeavor that we manage each year is the local government solid waste and materials management reporting process. This is a report that is statutorily required for every local government in North Carolina. So we have an online report that each local government fills out every year before September 1st. From there, our team reviews each report. We ask questions and clarify information if needed, and compile all the data, which feeds into the recycling chapter in the annual consolidated waste management report. And the title of our section is Local Government Waste Reduction Activities and Recycling Markets. And I'm sure you all are familiar, that's a giant report. So I already noted that in the 2022 report, our section starts on page 83. You can go to the next. So before I get into some of the recycling data, I wanted to set the stage with disposal trends. This is from our colleagues in the Division of Waste Management. And the red line shows the total tons of waste sent to municipal solid waste and construction and demolition landfills from fiscal year 1992 to fiscal year 2020. And that is compared to the state's population in blue. So 1992 was a baseline year from which we were supposed to achieve a 40% reduction in municipal solid waste by 2001. We obviously missed that goal, but you can tell that our disposal growth has actually been outpacing our population growth. So in 1992, we were disposing 1.07 tons per capita that year. And in 2022, we are now at 1.33 tons disposed per capita.
Is it not advancing again?
Nope, I still see disposal.
My screen is showing something else, so stand by.
Okay. I could try to describe a graph to you, but that probably wouldn't work out quite as well.
How about this?
Right.
I'm working there. Here we go.
Okay, here we go. So this is showing recycling activities or recovery trends through local government programs for the same time period. So I have shown on this graph yard waste in green versus all other recycling in blue, just because yard waste is widely variable based on the year. It's dependent upon weather events, storms. So if you see big fluctuations in yard waste, that's not necessarily indicative indicative of programmatic changes. But if you look at the blue line, and even if you do take both into account stacked together, you can see that our recycling has certainly grown over the past 30 years. We saw a lot of local governments establishing new programs in the 90s and the early 2000s, and most of those programs are still going, but we're seeing kind of a plateau over the last 10 or so years. And this is actually consistent with what we see at the national level from data from EPA. But still, we've gone from 128 pounds per capita recycled in 1992 to 284 pounds per capita recycled in 2022. Go to the next. So looking at the most recent year of recycling, this shows what types of materials were recovered by local government programs. So the total amount recycled was nearly 1.5 million tons. And the makeup of that is a little over half organics. That's primarily yard waste, but it also includes clean pallets and food waste. The next largest chunk in purple is fiber, and that's just paper materials, so cardboard and household paper. Followed by that are construction and demolition debris that was recovered for recycling, tires, glass, and metal, all of which were more than 5% of the total pie. And again, this represents what was recovered through local government programs. So it's the results of recycling programs that are operated in all 100 counties and 332 out of our 552 municipalities. So 60% of municipalities operate some sort of recycling program for their residents. We also track where these materials come from, whether it's curbside programs where the truck comes to your house and collects the materials, or from drop-off sites where you have to drive your recyclables to a collection point. And we know that curbside programs yield much higher recycling participation and tonnage just because it's so convenient. And so we track curbside programs over time as well. And in the last fiscal year, 54% of North Carolina households have access to curbside recycling. So this graph actually shows a subset of what was in that pie. It focuses in on what we call the traditional materials, or in other words, household recyclables. It's the cans, bottles, and paper that you can throw in your curbside bin and don't have to take for special management. So the orange in this graph is showing fiber. Again, that's just cardboard and paper. And the blue is showing containers, which includes aluminum cans, steel cans, glass bottles and jars, and plastic bottles and containers. And so again, you can see growth and then sort of a plateau over the last 10 or so years. And I do want to point out the gray section in the most recent 3 years of data. This is actually a change in methodology that we implemented in 2020 to give a more accurate picture of our statewide recovery. So prior to 2020, anything that a local government reported as collected for recycling was counted as being recycled. So if it goes in the bin, it's counted as recycling and included in our final numbers. But we know that in the real world, not everything that people put in the recycling bin actually belongs in there. When recyclables are taken to be sorted at a material recovery facility or a MRF, the stuff that doesn't belong or contamination gets removed and sent to the landfill for disposal. So the most common things are plastic bags, clothing, food residue. They also get stuff like garden hoses, bowling balls, all kinds of stuff people throw in the recycling bin. So we wanted our numbers to better reflect what actually makes it through the recycling facility and goes on to be made into something new. So that gray slice is what we've removed from our totals based on what the recycling facilities tell us is the average amount of contamination that comes in their doors. So you can tell, knowing that local governments collected about the same amount of materials as in 2019, but after removing contamination, the total recycling that gets reported is a little bit lower. So last year, that total amount of traditional recycling was about 430,000 tons. And EPA has a modeling tool to estimate the greenhouse gas savings as a result of recycling. So when you're thinking about a linear economy as a baseline, every new product is made from raw materials and then gets sent to landfill at the end of its useful life. But when you're able to capture that material for recycling and redirect it back into the manufacturing process, that's of course a circular economy, and you don't need as much energy and water and resulting emissions to create the new item. So your new item, say it's an aluminum can, has a lower carbon footprint when it's made with some or all recycled content compared to being made with all raw materials. So if we plug our numbers into the EPA model, our 430,212 tons recycled resulted in the avoidance of 1.14 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent being released. And to put it in more tangible terms, that's like taking more than 240,000 gas-powered cars off the road for a year. These greenhouse gas savings don't always get associated with recycling, but for this reason, we think that recycling needs to be part of a comprehensive climate change strategy. And in fact, the move to a more circular economy is written in as part of DEQ's strategic plan to reduce greenhouse gas impacts. So when you start to think of recycling as part of the circular economy, it's clear that recycling is manufacturing. You're preparing feedstock to go into a manufacturing process. So that activity is an economic driver and a jobs creator all on its own. We've done a series of job studies over the years, and our most recent one from 2020 revealed that just the private sector recycling industry employs 15,700 people with an average hourly wage of more than $23. And then if you look at the manufacturers that use recycled content in their products, we have more than 60 in the state that generate annual sales of more than 4 billion. Go to the next. I thought it'd be nice to get a little flavor of some of the companies in North Carolina who are taking the materials that our local governments collect and turning them into new things. So on the map, you can see a bunch of orange dots. Those represent more than 550 recycling companies in the state. And I'll go through these pictures that kind of surround the state, starting at the top center, the Reprieve. That is a brand of recycled polyester made by the company Unify, and they make it out of recycled clear PET bottles, so water and soda bottles. And they have facilities in Reidsville and Yadkinville, and their Reprieve line is 100% recycled content, which they sell to clothing and apparel brands to make anything from jeans to shoes to fleece jackets. Over to the right, the picture of bottles and the conveyor belt below are from two companies in Wilson. The bottom picture is at Strategic Materials, who takes recycled glass bottles and jars, cleans up the glass even further to remove things like paper and food residue and bottle caps, and then sizes it and sorts it by color to sell it to companies like Ardagh, who's right down the street and makes glass bottles for food and beverages. Down in the bottom, this is a picture from Envision Plastics in Reidsville. They're one of the biggest HDPE recyclers in the country. They take plastic milk jugs and laundry detergent jugs and have advanced technology to grind everything up and sort it by color. And then they make colored pellets that they sell back to brands to go right back into packaging for new products. On the bottom left, this is ClearPath Recycling. It's actually the biggest PET recycler in North America, and they're located right here in Fayetteville. They recycle plastic drink bottles into pellets that can be used to make new bottles or yarn that gets turned into carpet. And then finally in the top left, this is a picture from Jackson Paper and Silva. They take recycled cardboard and then make 100% recycled container board, which is used to make new cardboard boxes. I want to spend a minute talking about our recycling grant programs. One of the responsibilities of our division as defined by statute is to develop secondary materials markets by providing technical and financial support. So the financial support comes through our grant making. We have two main grant programs that we offer each year, one for local governments and one for recycling businesses. both with the common goal of expanding and improving the recycling in the state and thereby stimulating economic growth, creating new jobs, and sending less material to the landfill. So since fiscal year 2019, we have awarded a total of $3.3 million through 90 grants to private recycling businesses, and we've awarded $2.66 million through 144 grants to local governments. And we also track the impacts of these grants. And in the past 5 years, these investments are resulting in additional 300,000 more tons of materials being recycled each year. And on the business side, the grant projects have created 316 new private sector jobs. I'll point to the graph on the right. We do have a matching requirement for all of our grants. For our business grants, we require that the company match at least 50% of grant funding, but the private investment well exceeds that every year. In fact, the cumulative impact over the last 5 years has been an almost 300% match in private investment, with nearly 10 million in industry dollars from 3.3 million in state dollars. I also thought it might be nice to hear about some recent private investments, and almost all of these involve grant-funded projects. So we've had a lot of recent improvements at material recovery facilities, or MRFs. We have 16 of them in the state, and almost all are making upgrades to their facilities. So Waste Management in Morrisville is a new MRF built in 2020 to replace a smaller, outdated MRF in Raleigh. Mecklenburg County is about to completely rebuild their MRF, which serves the greater Charlotte region, and it will include a piece of grant-funded equipment to help them clean up their glass stream. And Sunoco and Republic both operate multiple MRFs in the state and have made various investments in equipment to help them get a cleaner, better quality end product of material to sell, and to help them increase the capacity of their plants so they can bring in more materials. Powerhouse Recycling is one of our electronics recyclers. They are making investments this year to have a designated line for solar panel recycling at their facility in Salisbury. Ames Copper Group is a secondary copper refinery in Shelby that had a huge expansion in 2020. Direct Pack is a manufacturer of plastic packaging who is expanding their footprint in Rockingham. They already make plastic packaging. One of their big lines is the clear plastic hinge containers that berries come in, and they're adding a recycling facility to be able to take PET bottles directly from the MRFs, prepare them, and then put them directly for use in those packages that they make. Hollywood is a company that makes outdoor recycled plastic furniture. They're based in Indiana and opened their second manufacturing facility in Roxborough. And they use recycled milk jugs to make a composite wood. So it looks like wood, but it's made of 100% recycled plastic. And ClearPath Recycling, I mentioned them earlier, their PET recycling facility in Fayetteville has continued to make investments over the years to increase capacity and make it run more efficiently and effectively. So you can see on the left, with some of our business grants, we've created a one-pager to highlight what the company does and specifically what the grant-funded project was all about. And all of these examples are investments in local economies. Most of them result in more jobs added. And for some of these bigger expansions and locations to the state, we have worked closely with the Department of Commerce and the Economic Development Partnership of North Carolina on recruitment efforts. And with the state's incentives for recyclers paired with our grant program for businesses, we can really be competitive to help bring new business to the state in this industry. Next slide. So I wanted to mention this longstanding tool that our division has maintained over the years. We've had it for decades and we use it and share it all the time in our day-to-day work, but we just upgraded it last year. We worked with our IT department to create a new interface, and we incorporated a mapping function that we didn't have previously. So the purpose is to display recycling companies in and around the state and allow users, it's open to the public, just hosted on an open website, to search by a certain material type. So if you're a company who has, in this example, restaurant food waste, you can come to the directory and search and find a recycler. So we have 744 companies listed in the directory, and 551 of them are in North Carolina. So speaking of food waste, the last thing I want to talk about today is exactly that. Food waste is a stream that we're putting a lot of new focus on. It's the #1 material that's going into our landfills right now. 24% of what we put into municipal solid waste is food waste, according to EPA. And we have always supported food waste reduction and encouraged composting, but seeing the scale of this issue, we know that tackling food waste is going to take a more comprehensive and proactive approach and can have really meaningful benefits. So this work is also called out in the DEQ strategic plan, specifically to reduce and divert food waste, to reduce emissions, foster economic growth, and reduce food insecurity. And this is in line with goals at the national level as well. The EPA and U.S. Department of Agriculture have goals to reduce food loss and waste by 50% by 2030. And we know that meeting that goal is going to take a variety of strategies with a lot of partners. So last year in October, we held a meeting and invited stakeholders from agriculture, food distribution, restaurants and grocery stores, food rescue organizations, composters. We tried to hit contacts from all across the food chain so that we could get together, start talking about this issue, and begin working on solutions. So at that meeting, we launched a new campaign, Use the Food NC, and we developed a campaign website with information and resources for different audiences, including consumers like you and me at home, what kind of actions we can take, businesses that are serving or distributing a lot of food like grocery stores and restaurants, and governments for how they can be involved at the local level. We also announced at that meeting a special grant program focused specifically on food waste. It was open to food rescue organizations or composters from the public or private sector. And we ended up awarding $390,000 to 11 successful grantees and expect that their projects are going to help divert an additional 20,000 tons of food waste away from landfill disposal. And most of those have contract start dates of May 1st, so they're just getting underway right now. So we're really excited about this work. We're continuing to engage with various stakeholders. We're actually planning a meeting later this summer with food hubs and food banks to talk about food donations, all with the goal of supporting and convening people at the state level, making connections and sharing resources so that we can use the food in higher and better ways throughout the state. And that concludes our remarks. So I want to thank everyone for the time and opportunity to speak, and we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you both, Cindy and Wendy. That was excellent and very impressive about how we have some of the biggest recyclers in the U.S. right within our state. What a great job we've had in attracting businesses like that. So thank you. Let me open up to questions to anybody else on the committee or commission. Does anybody else have any questions? I noticed that Commissioner Lyerly said it was a great presentation. So I guess moving on, I just want to thank you. I was interested in a couple of things about the disposal growth and why some of the recovery trends are down. Does any of that have to do with debris from hurricanes and other natural disasters? On the coast here in New Hanover County, whenever we have a hurricane, we have tremendous amounts of trees and waste like that. Does that enter into some of these and skew any of the statistics?
Well, certainly you hit on a good point. Certainly hurricanes and natural disasters impact waste all across the state. I'll let Sandy talk a little bit more about the details of the data. Generally speaking, yard debris and woody debris, we try to divert that material from landfill disposal as much as possible. It can often skew numbers in the yard waste recovery in the years of major storm events like that. But Sandy, do you have any other details to add?
Yeah, I would say that big storm events certainly have an impact on, municipal solid waste and construction and demolition disposal, especially when you have a lot of damaged properties. And I think you probably could tell, I didn't even point it out, but you can see a very close trend with the economy, as it relates to disposal. There was a big dip in numbers, and that was after 2008 and the years following the recession. So that, certainly has a big impact on how things are trending as well.
Okay, thank you. Again, any other questions?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
Commissioner McAdams, non-committee member, will you allow a non-committee member to intervene in the discussion?
Of course.
Okay, well, thank you. Both Wendy and Sandy, thank you for this presentation. Recycling is an interest of mine, and I just have a couple of questions about the work that you do in your division and in your section concerning this. Is there any advocacy for recycling itself down at the end user level, we the people? Is there any advocacy for that? Is that part of your program as well?
Well, advocacy and education might be kind of linked together. Certainly, we don't see as a state agency necessarily an advocacy role. But we certainly do want to share out information about recycling, the importance of recycling, how it impacts our economy, how it is a good thing to do, and to make sure people have a clear information about how to participate in recycling programs effectively. So what to put in your curbside container, for example. So we really are very active in that space and trying to help get accurate, clear information out to the public around recycling and materials management issues. So we certainly do try to promote in that sense. We don't necessarily think of it as advocacy, and nonprofits might get in that space a little bit more. But certainly we do want to make sure accurate information is out there so that there's not confusion about the benefits and the value of moving these materials from a waste stream back into our economy.
Okay, I appreciate that, but a follow-up. I hear comments from people that, oh, you know what, everything is recyclable these days, and I see people just chucking all kinds of stuff into bins, and that has to burden the recycling system. And people who take their half-used jar of peanut butter and just throw the whole thing in there because the jar itself is recyclable. So let's do that. People leave a meeting and they're given a plastic bottle of water and they throw the half full bottle in the recycling bin with the cap on it. And I wonder how much these things really impair the process of recycling, and if there's any education that could be done. Could we at the consumer level be educated to be better at putting things into the recycling system, and in that way improve the system, improve the outcomes?
Yes, I would say absolutely. And those points that you made are very real and important for us to share out at the state level and work with local governments and others that are managing recycling programs directly to make sure clear information is at the consumer level. You're absolutely right. Those, if you recall the graph that Sandy showed where it was tracking the recovery of recyclables in North Carolina, And then the last few years, we had the calculation of how much of that is actually the contamination of recyclables. That's exactly what's happening when folks are putting things into a recycling container that actually should not be there in the first place, that are not an accepted material within that particular program. Then it is counted as contamination. And that, of course, has negative impacts on the cost of the program, as well as the effectiveness of getting clean feedstock to those manufacturers that really want to take that material and make it into something new. To address that, we work really hard to, provide support to local governments and other service providers about how to educate folks about recycling and what to put in the container. So we didn't show on our slide deck, but we have what's called a MRF shed map, which is a map of the state of North Carolina that shows, just like watersheds, where water flows and where water flows into drainage basins, and the MRF shed map will show the flow of recyclable materials to a material processing facility, a MRF. And that information also you can link in and see what your specific community takes. We have accepted material list for every community across the state and all those MRFs that provide that service. So that's been a really powerful tool. We have a set of education and outreach materials that we can customize for local governments or others that are trying to implement, share out with the public and their participants in the program. So we work really hard to facilitate that. It's a big state, and we need those local partners to really join with us to get that information out.
Okay. Well, I thank you. This is an area of interest of mine, and I have lots of questions and find myself wishing that we did a better job of this. I appreciate the work that you and your teammates do. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Feel free to reach out to us anytime if you have follow-ups.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Well, again, thank you, Wendy and Sandy. That was a really complete presentation and actually very encouraging, I thought, to see what we've got going on in the state. I had no idea there were that many recycling facilities, and that all 100 counties are also participating in one way or another. So that was good news. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is upcoming items. We have nothing on the agenda for tomorrow. And then for future committee meetings, the Division of Water Resources is going to put together an overview of groundwater sampling, which is another informational item, which I've been quite enjoying with how we're learning about what the programs are doing. And again, if anybody else, any of the other commissioners has some ideas about what you'd like presented while we don't have action items, I'd welcome any suggestions. Now on to director's remarks. I know Director Scott is here. I'll turn it over to him.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Bailey. I really appreciate Wendy and Sandy joining us this afternoon for the committee, this morning for the committee meeting, and providing that recycling overview. I don't have further updates. As you noted, there's no specific action items on behalf of the Division of Waste Management before the full commission tomorrow. And I believe Richard Rogers was also joining us, Chair Bailey. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Rogers. Well, then I think we can go ahead and adjourn the meeting. And we'll see everybody tomorrow. Thank you very much.